Agile20 Reflect Festival. Please go online. It's Agile20 Reflect Festival. Do a Google search. There's only one out there. If you haven't joined, go ahead and join. You'll get access to our storage, which is we're going to take all of these Zoom recordings and put it out there for everyone. So there's no way you can join 600 plus events worldwide, but you can go and look at the Zoom recordings and everything and experience it. We will also store the Zoom recording in our Zoom space at our meetup place, and I'll send that out to everyone so you'll get access to it, as well as anything else Anthony wants to provide us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Anthony Coppedge, and he's works with IBM right now, my old haunt for 20 years. And I love what he's doing. He kind of shared to me what he's doing, and it's more about outcome-based work, but it's more about how do we use agile practices and ways of thinking in the business world. So there's no software. We're not building any software. Okay, we are taking these principles, these values, some of these practices, some of the tools that Anthony will go through that he created to help us on organize our people and work so that we can achieve or realize our outcomes, our business outcomes, which is very critical and important. So as he went through some of the stuff with me that he was doing, I thought it was fantastic and phenomenal. So I asked him if he could come here and share that with us. And he was so nice and agreed to do that. So without further ado, here's Anthony.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you, Jay. So I am at IBM, like you said. I am in the Agile marketing team, and I'm on the transformation team there, where I lead the discipline and scaling portion of what we're doing with Agile marketing at IBM. We have about 3,500 marketers and around the world. And so this is our scaling of the Agile values and principles applied in that space. Of course, IBM has a lot of software development that's Agile based as well, but this is a unique take on it. I was originally asked to come in as a contractor and lead the Agile digital sales transformation. Digital sales at the time was rolled up under marketing, and digital sales was think of it as inside sales, the kind of the first touch pieces of qualifying leads and introducing people to our business partners or passing on to a field seller. And the idea was, look, marketing and sales need to work together. They need to be tied at the hip, as I like to say. And so my initial role was come in and let's get that started. And so I looked around the space and I couldn't find other people doing Agile sales at scale and enterprise. So I invented as much as I could, but tried to live within the constraints of what we were doing with Agile marketing so that we would have an easy partnership in the sharing of insights, information, and process so that there was an easy way to create that cross-functional teaming that we wanted to get to. So part of this was I was brought in and I went and I had 26 squads of between 7 and about 12 people each. And we were rolling this out to say, how do we do this? And so for us, Agile sales is very much individual contributors. We did have some team aspects to it, but it was how do we create this rising tide that would float all boats? And what I did was I created a way for us to work leveraging some of the Kanban principles. And if someone were to press me for it, if you looked at it and you're an Agilist like this group is, you would say that's lean Scrumban. You're right, but I never use that terminology at IBM because it would mean nothing in that space. But that's really what we did. And we found a way to say, of the work that we can plan for, how do we manage that well? And then how do you manage the tension of the unplanned work, which is so very frequent in marketing and sales? And it's that tension that we have to manage that made the idea of leveraging a Kanban type workflow for the actual week-to-week work well. And that was fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 9 slides, and then we're going to go play. So in like 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to try to go through this quickly, just go through the slides that kind of set some context about thinking around that I've had around this. And then I'll tell you the problem that we were trying to solve in just a second here and how we've done that. And then I'm going to invite you to join me in Mural. Mural is an online whiteboarding / interactive collaboration space, and it's going to be free for you to do. It's just going to be a link. I'll share it a little bit later. And then I'm going to show you the dashboard that we created, very much Agile MVP. It's Excel for today until we can get the software development around it. But like anything, just trying to find what works and iterate. So with that said, I want to invite questions. If you have questions, please drop it into the chat. And I know that there are multiple people here that will be looking at that and alerting me. Later on, I'll have you be able to just unmute your mic and talk to me once we're into Mural. But for now, let me just dive in and kind of get this part over with so we can go have fun together. All right, so sharing my screen, make sure we can all see it. And Jay, I see you're unmuted still. You do see this, want to make sure everybody sees it?
Yep, I see it.
Great.
Yep.
Great. All right. So what I want to talk to you about is what I call the retrospective radar, and you'll see why it's called that very shortly. It's obvious. But what I want to focus on today is how I've learned and how we're learning to use qualitative feedback in a quantitative way. And this was the big aha. It was a huge breakthrough for us. And I'm going to show you why. I hope you agree. And I hope that you'll be able to take it back and apply it in your space. So what I want to start with is this visualization, because this is the idea I've had. And it's not mine original, but it's the way I've described it, is that we have an execution cycle and a strategy cycle. And that if you think about a lot of the agile practices, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or Lean, when you look at what's happening, there is a strategy that's rolled out and then the teams execute against it. And they have that cyclical motion that you see in the Scrum diagram, right? So kind of think like that. But then what I was always struck by was I worked for a software as a service company once. And when I first got started in this, and what was fascinating to me is they could iterate very quickly. But what I always wondered is, but did you build the right thing? I know you built a thing, and I know that you're very efficient at building those things, but my question is, but is that the greatest value we can deliver to our clients, or is that just something someone wanted to build and we could? So the difference between what you can build and what you should build, what you can focus on and what you should focus on, has always been a key part of me, because I want to drive business results, which I very much like what Steve Denning says in Age of Agile, where he says that profit should be the byproduct, right? The Milton Friedman philosophy of, go be in business to make money is, 1970 called it once, it's modeled back. And where we are today, and we see this with the largest, most scalable companies the world has ever seen, are all agile in their core infrastructure. And what's fascinating about that is because bytes scale and atoms don't. People don't scale. So when I look at this, I'm like, well, how do we scale the thinking? Because I still think that that's valuable. So what I was trying to do is say, when a strategy is rolled out, we experiment, we measure, we have our experiences about it, and then we give some level of feedback. In the retrospectives of a Scrum team, for example, that stays pretty much within the team until the Scrum Master goes a conversation with key stakeholders, right? Or the key stakeholders are invited to a showcase or something like that. But what I was trying to get to is, but how do we change the strategy? How do we change the whole, like the big thing? And I thought that there's a dissonance between, oh, we got someone unmuted. I'm not sure who that is. Can someone help me with that?
Can everyone go on mute, please?
It's David. David, guys.
Hang on,
Can
guys.
someone mute David?
Something acting up here.
We got it? All right. So what I wanted to do was be able to take this and say, how do we get feedback from the trenches at scale back to our leaders? And that was really hard. So I'm going to show you what I did, but let's dive through the talk here just so I can kind of cover the basis. We believe status strategy cascades down and feedback flows up, right? That you don't just sort of drift into a good area. You don't sort of land in great customer centricity. You have to discipline and prioritize to get there. And that's a quote from Andy Stanley that I'm paraphrasing. But if the strategy cascades down, how do we have feedback flow all the way back up? Because that seems really hard to do. And so we were trying to solve that because we kept finding the same problems in silos and we couldn't address it at scale. And I wanted to do that. So I said, well, I like this idea that Galileo, I've heard this quote that says, measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not so. So I think about this as like a thermometer and a barometer. We measure lots of stuff, even in our own thing. We have velocity, story points just inside Agile, but in business, we measure our performance metrics. And they're just data, they're just numbers. And if your business is like any other business I've ever been a part of, people can make a spreadsheet, say whatever the heck they want. So I don't trust all the numbers. They're not validated against feedback. And that's what I've always wanted to do. So if the thermometer will tell you what the temperature is, that's useful if you're trying to see if you're sick or not, right? But a barometer actually does have a number. It will tell you the air pressure. But what's valuable about a barometer is not that number. It's that number over time. So if you look at a barometer and you see the rate of change and the direction of change is something you can understand, you can fairly accurately say, probably going to have some rain. And that's kind of the idea here is if we got enough good feedback at scale, could we more accurately address the things that are systemic, and could we predict market changes at least as they're happening, if not slightly ahead of where they are, rather than always being behind. And I wanted to figure that out. So what I've done is I figured out the first thing of this was that we didn't have enough psychological safety, right? That we needed to create and highlight the dissonance that we saw between X and Y. So we say this in our performance numbers in sales, for example, but the reps are saying this, and there's a disconnect. One says what, the other says why. One says when, the other may say how. And what I wanted to do is marry those two. And then I wanted to make it safe by saying, when you give us this feedback, we want to act on it. So we need courageous feedback. We need you to trust that we're going to make it psychologically safe for you to give that feedback with no punitive issues whatsoever. And instead, this is a real opportunity for us to get better, first within the team, then across squads, and eventually throughout the organization. And so we put a couple of processes in place, which we'll walk through. So feedback then became not just a gift, but essential. Because if we were going to make the big, huge changes we needed to make, if we wanted to understand why something was or wasn't working, we needed not only the performance data, we needed the feedback to correlate to and eventually have some sort of causality between the two. And this is a great quote from Ed Batista at Stanford, where he talks about the idea of achieving goals through working relationships, and that direct feedback is the best way to do that. But direct feedback, remember, people don't scale. And this is what I kept running into. So I wanted to solve that. So I hope I'm painting a picture that says, this is the way I was thinking about it. Here's the thing. I'm sure you've all been here. And here's what I was trying to accomplish. So I looked at existing models. I like the idea of visualizing causality, where if there's an action, it leads to a result, which shapes future actions, which lead to new results. Like, I like that. And I like the idea of visible feedback loops. We love work boards, whether you're using, Jira or Trello or whatever it is to visualize your work, or back in the office days, sticky notes on a whiteboard. I've done it all. And what I was trying to get to was, what are ways that I could get this insight? And so this was all approaches I've tried and have learned from, but ultimately they weren't getting me what I wanted to get to, which was an impact point. So we looked at an impact matrix to say, how do we understand more like this, less like that? Remember that barometer? It's more like this, it's less like that. And what we could discern is some things were pretty obvious as low-hanging fruit versus some things of questionable value and things that we could ruthlessly eliminate. And so we were trying to figure those out. And it got better, but it wasn't great, and we weren't ahead of the curve, and we certainly weren't with it. We were still lagging in our insights, and I wasn't satisfied with that. Plus, it was very hard to parse data when you're just dumping retrospective feedback into Excel tables and running them through Watson natural language processor and trying to get any kind of insight out of it. It was just incredibly difficult. So I was looking for a better way. And what I ended up with is coming back to this idea of, so how do I get this? And I know I started with this, and it's why I'm ending with this slide. I came back to, but this is what I want. And so all that other stuff led me to a place of going, we have to invent it. Now, having said that, does that lay a groundwork? Is everybody kind of clear on the problem of saying, we know we need to get better. We know we can measure our capacities, but we're not sure that we're always delivering value? Is that kind of an obvious thing that we're all agreeing with, is like, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about? Does that make sense to everybody on the call? Yeah. So if anybody else experienced something similar where you were trying to solve for this seemingly unsolvable thing, I don't think I've got the only person who's thought about this. I'm just I found a way to address it. And I hope that what you're seeing on the screen now is going to maybe have some fun with some light bulb moments. So I really, really like the circles of influence, control, influence, and concern from Stephen Covey, right? I love this, and I teach this because I think it's so helpful when you're talking about teams and or individuals to say, but I know what you can't do. What can you do? And what's in your control? What can you manage? How do you manage you? And how do we manage each other? And how do we get the results we want? And so this became a very pragmatic way to say, gosh, if we know what's ours, then maybe our managers can remove blockers, right? Or maybe a Scrum Master could remove a blocker if you're in Scrum. But then there's stuff they can't even do. This is a larger systemic issue in the organization. It's a tooling issue. It's a process issue. It's a BAU issue. And that's circle of concern. So I've taught them to think this way so that as we prioritize work for each week, we weren't trying to solve the unsolvable. We were trying to address what we could do. Make sense? So I started there, and this was an obvious place. Then Pat Kua, I was introduced to his work with the Starfish retrospective, where he says, during the retro, instead of just asking what went well and don't go well, actually, let's be specific and talk about what would you start doing or stop doing or keep doing or do less of or more of. If you really think about it, those are your 5 options in life. Like you kind of get to do one of those 5 things, and that's it. You don't get more options than that. And I like the simplicity of it. And right before the pandemic happened, we were still in the process of capturing, in Box, a bunch of verbatim Excel captures of feedback from these retrospectives. And so I had thousands of lines of feedback of text of what our reps were telling us, but I had no way to parse that easily. So enter Watson natural language processor and me trying to do it that way. And what I found was it was very difficult to make data structured insight out of unstructured data, which, surprise. So what I did is I had this idea, what would happen if I combined the two? What if I said, if we had a way to prioritize the things you can control right here in the middle, what do you think you should do next based on what you just learned during the retrospective? You just talked about the things you're sharing insights together, you're learning, your best practices, things not to do, things to do. And then how do we get better together? Well, if you can take a great idea and go act on it, go do it. You don't need permission to do that. So go start doing something based on what someone else did, or stop doing something that's not work, or do less of something until it's improved and instead do something else more of. And I wanted them to own that because I wanted the teams to drive the change. I wanted the teams to tell us what to do. And so the circle of control was a very easy thing for them. They got that. The 5 segments then of start, stop, less, keep, and more just became a prioritization tool, frankly, right? It's very simple. And then they can go do that. But the key here, this is where I got what I wanted, was the ability to say, what can your manager get out of waiting blocker? What's stuck between doing and done that we can get moved, someone can help with? And so by saying, well, I'd like my manager to help with more of this. I'd like my manager to stop doing this. I'd like my manager to talk about why we have to do this. Let's do less of this thing, right? And what we were getting, and this was, I say manager because in the sales role, this is the way it worked. There were not a Scrum Master situation because we weren't Scrum, but you could think Scrum Master here, our stakeholder. But the idea was what we were doing was saying there's a way to give not only feedback, but the kind of feedback and the direction you wanted that feedback to go in. More like this, less like that. And then for things that your manager can't fix or the Scrum Master couldn't fix, you go beyond that. Now we're talking about the systemic things. What would you like our leaders to be aware of? And we were able to put that information here. And so what it gave us was a way to not only share insights, but then visualize that, track that, capture it, and measure it. And I'm going to show you later how we can pivot that data. But I do want to pause and ask if there's any questions before I continue, because I'm kind of just on a clip here. Any questions or thoughts so far?
Oh, I like
Greg?
it.
Okay.
I like it, Anthony. This is really interesting. I like how you combine these 2 constructs together. I like it so far.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to pop over to this screen here and just show you an example, right? So this is a fake screen, fake squad where they would come together during the retrospective and they would talk about the things that went well, right? They would group them typically. So these 2 were 2 people had a similar experience, something that went well, so they would group them together. And what we were doing is not doing a stand and deliver of tell me 10 things you did this week. Instead, this was the share what's valuable. And I actually call it out here in orange. Only add what we call sticky notes here that are valuable to share with the team. This is not let me prove I was busy. This is the things that are worth sharing, either that went well or that did not go well. And we want both because there's only two ways to improve. You optimize upside or you eliminate downside. That's it. So we want both. Both are valuable. And by doing so, what ends up happening is someone gets an idea, because remember, a lot of individual contributors in sales and marketing, and they go, that's a great idea. I want to do that. So now they're learning from their peer. This is inside a team. But what's cool is we can share this across teams, and I'm about to show you how. So what we would have them do is we'd have them do whatever color sticky note they want, which we're going to do in a minute. I'm going to invite you all to come play. We would have them drag these over here and go, well, what are you going to do? Now, don't worry about the color change. I'll explain that in a second. So they would take the existing colors and just drag things over here and go, I'm going to start doing that. And that's theirs. And so they're helping themselves prioritize their backlog the very next week, right? Real simple. So what we do after the fact is once the team is done, we go in and change the colors because Mural has this really cool feature. They do have an API that I've not tied into yet. I am working on that. But if you highlight all these and right click, you can save it to GitHub or as a CSV file. Now, what's cool about that is notice that everything inside the circle of control is all this pinkish color. That's because that's not feedback. I'm not capturing that is information for the reps. We are counting the quantity of sticky notes they have there to understand what percentage of effort is here versus in the rings. But ultimately, what we are doing is having a unique color code for the background color of each sticky note for 5 dimensions for the influence and 5 colors for the circle of concern. So what I'm able to do is by saying, I know for a fact that color right there always is associated with circle of influence, stop doing. So no matter which board it's on, when we export these out, I can combine them and tell you that that's where that card came from. So we now have a way to parse the data after the fact outside of Mural because of this export feature. So let me just jump into Excel and show you the fun stuff before we come play. But Excel, what we did is we just built out a tool to parse it. So I have the ability to say there's X number of teams or squads or whatever, and we have all this data. Well, because we do this import, I can tell you which team it came from. I can tell you which circle it was in, control, influence, or concern, and I can tell you which segment it was in. And then I can tell you, we can, of course, sort by date. So we had a way to look at this data in a really unique way. And this was where the aha started happening. Because if I'm a team lead for DevOps and I am circle of influence because I'm the manager for that team, or if I'm a Scrum Master, for example, then I can filter down just to that. And I can see some interesting trends. Well, over time, they've had 126 sticky notes in the circle of influence. That's things they want me to help with, right? So I'm coming to manage it this way every month or every week, actually. And if I look at the aggregate, what it shows me here is that most of their feedback is the less of, which means we still have too many things that are not yielding value or that are in the way or that are not effective that we need to change for the benefit of them. So we are getting that feedback, and then I could try to act on that. But what's interesting to me is the second highest value is start doing. You know what that says? They care enough, they feel enough that their voice matters, that they're willing to say, and here's what we think you should do. They're actually coming up with the ideas, being close enough to the problem to actually come up with the solutions that we could never come up with because we're not doing the work. Right? So we now have both the complaint, right? Sure, the complaint. We have the things that's not working, but we also have a way to move forward what is working by the experts doing it. And this is a game changer. So because I can do this on a team by team basis, or as you saw a minute ago, I can do it across all teams. I can look at things like what's the engagement rate? Well, it's very easy to see that my mouse just stopped on me. It's very easy to see when I click on both of these where the feedback, which teams are giving us the most feedback, who are giving us the least. Where is the percentage of feedback? 35% for senior leadership, 65% for the manager. Seems about right. And then we start looking at these trends, but we go beyond that. Notice status on the right. Status is how we're acting on the feedback. And this is the big deal. Because each manager has access to this, we put this in box. Each manager gets to come in and say, oh, that feedback that you gave, that one's under consideration. That one's already in progress. That one I've escalated above me. I can't solve that. And we're showing the reps how their feedback is being acted upon. And what's cool is at a micro level, we're doing this week by week, line by line, squad by squad. But because we do it all together, we're getting a macro view across the entire organization that we've never been able to have before. And it's been remarkable. So going back to being on this team, let's say I'm this team and I'm the manager. What's cool is if you scroll down here, there's some data, but I'm just going to show you all those verbatim feedbacks. They're all here. So everything that's ever been on a mural board on those sticky notes that someone's put in, we actually have the verbatim text that we can act on here. And the manager, by simply coming over to the data table here, again, this is MVP, guys. It's not perfect. It's obviously not ready for like daylight for everybody, but I can come in if I'm the manager for that team. I can come in and see it and I can say, well, what's the status of that? Oh, that one's actually completed now. That one was declined. We're not going to do that because it turns out if we do that, it breaks 3 other things, right? So we start showing how the feedback leads to change here. And then when I come back to the dashboard, it's just going to refresh it. And then the updated information is here. And it's just a slight lag and then it'll refresh and show up. So I'm going to build this all out as software, obviously, but the idea was MVP. How do we start? So this became the big aha, was now our senior leadership can parse the feedback for them. And the managers can or the team leads can parse the feedback at that level. But combined, we start seeing trends and patterns we never saw before. And one last thing before I stop talking for a minute, we still run it through Watson Natural Language Processor. So I can take all that data per team, per segment, per circle, ring, and I can run it through and run it through Watson. And then we go, so what's the keyword frequency? What's the emotion? What's the sentiment? And what's our analysis on it so we can look for patterns and trends across teams, which we never could before. So again, all very powerful, but it all started because we needed a way. And Mural gave us that way to start here. So with that in mind, I'm gonna pause and ask if there's any questions before I send the invite link out so that you guys can see and come play with me in Mural.
So I had 2 questions / feedbacks, or no,
Sure.
not feedbacks. So the first one is sales. I don't know. What was your experience? Is people in sales who have to achieve the quotas are not going to give up their let's do more of this, their tricks or their techniques or their best practices or their, I don't know if they have been sharing that. That was the number one. And the other one is the circles of concerns control /
I hear a little one.
I cannot even hear myself. / of control. I didn't understand them at the beginning as circles of hierarchy, like just not circles. I mean levels of hierarchy. I thought these were areas where I had things I can influence, things I cannot influence, and things completely out of my focus beyond the orange one. So these are my 2.
Yeah. So on the screen, if I'm in, so this works for sales, marketing, HR, finance, software development. I don't care, right? It works anywhere. Anything I can manage for myself goes inside that center. And now what I'm doing is I'm saying, am I personally choosing to start doing, stop doing, less of, keep doing, and more of? Anytime I can't, and I need some help, I need some air cover, I go to my leader or one level up or whatever your next level is. And you put it here in the yellow ring. So now you're asking beyond what I can do. That's not my authority. I need someone else's. I have them put it here in the yellow ring so that the circle of influence is what the manager is going to get is, oh, that's great feedback. Thank you for that. And then if the manager can't solve it and we know that it's like, we need this software to work differently. We have a huge problem with this software. That's not something a manager can solve. So you're going to send that up to senior leadership. So that goes in that outer ring. And the outer ring, we are sending this data is available. We parse this, I get to the executives. So the executives get to see it in an aggregated form and act on it, just like a local manager does. And because we do this weekly, it's, 4 or 5 pieces of feedback, 10 pieces of feedback, maybe 20 in a week. It's not a lot, but over a month, it is quite a bit. And over a quarter, it's a lot. But what we're doing is making it bite size. So the individual contributor piece, everybody's got an individual contributor piece. I don't care if you're on a project team or a salesperson, you still have to do your portion. This is about how do I manage me and how do I get help beyond me? Did that answer your question?
Sorry. Yeah. No, what I meant was just that sales are not known for being very collaborative, by saying their secrets. But I guess I understood it could be used in any area. It doesn't matter. It's just the example here.
Yeah. Any other questions before I continue?
Yeah, I had just a really quick one. So I guess there's some confidentiality, right? For, some of these individual contributors' names are not associated between these? Or?
You can do it that way. So let me just show an example here. I think I had it on this one right here. Yep. On this demonstration, you might see, I think someone put their initials on them. So if the rep wants to see which one was theirs, they could put their initials on it. One of the new features coming in Mural very soon is in the bottom right corner. If you're logged in, it'll put your initials on it, but we can turn that on or off. So if we want to keep it anonymous and people can do it anonymously, you could. I don't think that's particularly helpful when you're trying to change the culture. I think the idea of having your name associated with it is, in a psychologically safe environment, is the way to go. But the key is psychologically safe environment. So yeah, we want it to be where we can toggle that on or off. But generally speaking, we're seeing people either put initials, or in the new version with Mural, there will be your name appended to it if we turn that feature on.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Who wants to play? Any other questions?
Hey, we have a quick question in the chat.
Sure.
Says, I see how you group similar feedback graphically, but is this done in the roll-up of items that managers review and update? If 4 people cite the same thing in 4 different ways, is this consolidated into one?
No, we actually count them individually because we want to know the total count. But what we do is when the manager goes to act on it, one of the drop-down fields, remember there was in progress, completed, one of them is duplicate. So once you've acted on one, you could put duplicate on the others. We still count it, because the other thing that's useful for is when I run it through Watson Natural Language Processor, we're able to then see the frequency of something. And so if I do a word cloud as an output, for example, something that's 5 times is going to be a bigger word, which means it's more prevalent, more frequent, and we probably ought to pay attention to it. So you actually don't want to suppress that. Good question. Another question is I see how you group similar feedback, but is this done in the roll-up of items that managers review and update?
That's the one I just read.
Oh, that's what you just said. Okay, sorry. Okay. So who wants to play? May want to play with this?
Hey, quick
Me.
question.
There's the link in chat. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was Michael, to his point. If you have duplicates and they're in various areas of control, how is that understood as a duplicate?
It's understood as a duplicate because in Excel, I can filter by just circle of control. So because of that, I don't have to see a duplicate in any other space. I can do it per ring or per circle, however you want to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So you notice I'm excluding circle of control. That's
right.
Because the control is not feedback. It's just for the reps. I count it. Why do I count it? Because I actually want to show the total amount of sticky notes created is a good proxy for understanding the prioritization of effort. Here's what I mean by that. If 80% of the content is in circle of control and 20% is in the outer 2 rings, I'm pretty happy. Why? Because it means they have what they think they need to go and just go do. They feel authoritative, they feel empowered. And so they're just going and do, they're just trying to get some help. But if I were to see a 50-50 between circle of control and then influence and concern, I would have lots of red flags to go, wow, that is not an empowered group. That's a group that feels like they have to ask permission. They feel like they don't have authority. They don't feel psychologically safe. So we do actually count the quantity because it does reveal a larger meta issue. It can. It generally points out that way.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I've just invited you all to come play with me. So I'm going to put this up here and you'll see that your cursor moves around and you'll see other people joining up. And if you come in with your name or not, that's fine. It'll make you a visiting animal name. And that's just for funsies. That's what it does. But what it does is let everybody join in. And what you can do, let me just walk you through a little bit. In the top left here are the actual sticky notes. If you click and drag on a sticky note and drop it down, you can bring it down into the what's delivering value, what's not delivering value. And the colors are there just because some people want to see all theirs in blue or all theirs in yellow. But you can do whatever you want. So feel free to grab those sticky notes, drag them down here. And then if you want to actually edit it, if you notice, I have on my screen, there's the second icon, the little floating toolbar is a magnifying glass. Click that and it'll zoom right into your sticky note. So Mural acts very much like a whiteboard. If you wanted to put a sticky note on a 20-foot whiteboard, to see the sticky note, you would have to walk up to it. That's what zooming approximates here, is going up to the board. And then on the bottom right corner, you have a zoom out feature. that you can use, or if your mouse or trackpad has Zoom, you can just do it very, very quickly like that. But now you can go in there and edit that and start typing your text and say, I want to share how this went exceptionally well today, and or whatever I'm going to say. Right. So everybody gets to play and bring their own colors and share from their week what's worth sharing. So here's my question for you. If you want to play along, what went well for you guys during this last week? It's Friday. Yay. Friday. Name something that went well for you professionally this week. Project, a personal moment of triumph. Just capture stuff there. And then let's capture something that did not go well and just put it over here in the what did not go well column. And I'll grab one of mine and move it over. You can just double click and start your own sticky note. I pre-size these to fit the radar, which is why they're up there that way. And I'll point out, by the way, that this template is going to be available in Mural very soon. I've submitted this to them. They've asked me for it. They love what we're doing. And so we're going to have this Mural template available to anybody, not just IBMers. So this will be something that I've created a generic version, what you're looking at here, so that you guys can have this and go start using it yourselves if you use Mural. So I'm excited about that. So go ahead and add some stuff in. And then once you've done that, let's talk about similar ideas, similar types of successes, or similar types of pain points. Group them together and just move your stuff around. Once you've done that, then we would talk about what went well as a group. We're not going to do that today for time, but at the end, what you would do is decide, well, based on what Grace went through and what Laura went through, their ideas were great. I want to start that next week. So I then grab their card and hit, in my case, Apple D or Command D, which is duplicate. I duplicate their card, I put my initials on it, and I drag it over. What can we change, or how can we adapt? And I'm instantly getting my ship lifted up through their knowledge, their experience, their expertise. And I'm getting better because of them. So as a team, even though individual contributors, we're getting better. And this is a big part in a non-Scrum environment that we had to figure out, how do we do this? In a Scrum environment, it's obviously much more clear when the team is working towards delivering a product or a feature or software. It's clear that we're all working on the same thing. It's not in sales and marketing. So what we have to do is find, so what are the common denominators? What are the things that are working? And we translate that as a transferable thing that makes us all a little bit better. And what we aim for is 1% better a week. And that's what I tell everybody. If we just get 1% better in any specific area per week, that's pretty doable. By the way, do that 50 weeks in a row and you're 50% better. And the CFO would love that. So let's figure out how to continuously get better. So this is our way of doing it. And it's just been really, really well received. And it's been fun because people during COVID in particular, where we were all in the office, I rolled this out the month before COVID hit, thank goodness. And we didn't miss a beat. I mean, from the communication, the stand-ups, the retrospectives all kept going. And then we had this tool to help us immediately transition to a work from home. And it's like nothing changed. It was very, very fortunate. Questions, thoughts, feedback. What is my email? A Coppedge, ACOPPE, I'll put it in chat, at IBM.com. Thanks for saying. There you go. Thoughts? You can open your mics up. Just feel free to jump in. I'm happy to chat. I'm here for you. This is fun for me, but I'm here for you. I'm hopeful that there's something here for you.
Anthony, question. Yes. What about contextualizing value? Because a lot of companies treat value differently. How would you input that here, or would you just say, well, that's a value for a certain company. They know what the value is.
It's for the team, actually, right? So let's say I've got a team that's delivering a particular product, feature, result, whatever. Whatever that is, that team has got a North Star, something they've defined as success for them. What it means for them to deliver value has to be defined as part of their working agreement. We call that a social contract at IBM. And so that social contract defines what that looks like. And so we know when we say value, we know it means two very important things. High value work in the sales organization that I've led here says it this way. It's not high value if it only benefits IBM. It's only high value if it benefits our clients and IBM. So what we're doing is we're putting that client-centric, let's orbit around the client, not have the client orbit around us mindset of agility front and center. So we have to define that before we get here. But since we know what that is and we constantly talk about that and we hold ourselves against that standard through OKRs, our targets, and our objectives, what we're doing is now here at this point, codifying, okay, how did you deliver value this week?
Yeah, cool.
What didn't deliver value this week? But that's unique per team.
Anthony, question from the chat. Will this template be available in Miro, M-I-R-O?
Not yet. I have not met with the people from Miro. I'd be delighted to make it in that tool as well. But it's Mural has been someone that's a partner that IBM has chosen. So we use them and they're fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Mural. So it's where it exists today, but I'm sure that if Miro wanted to talk to me about building this for them, sure. Because let's just spread the love of, things that work.
Anthony, back to duplicates. If you have the team working together and face-to-face, does that have any constraints on using this? Because if I'm with my team and say there's a behavioral thing that's going on and I decide, hey, I want to put this on here, there may be a different type of conversation that happens around that.
I'm not sure why that would be. In my mind, that's not an automatic. So maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I'm thinking particularly of newer teams when they're sort of going through that storming phase. And
okay,
when you're with a team and if you're fairly healthy communicator, as Scrum Master or whatever, you can bring these things up. And people they're slightly uncomfortable, they'll deal with them. But this, to me, it seems very, as you said, COVID is like, okay, we're at home doing, going through this and putting our information on there. How would you? And I'm probably thinking I'm getting the answer myself as I say it. But how would you bring subjects like that in a more comfortable way? I'm not finding the right words. Because it can be kind of difficult, can you, when you put behaviors down or people problems down?
Yeah, but again, one of the things we do. So I'm gonna share my screen and show you something I had not planned on sharing, but I'm fine with doing so. No, it's good. I'm happy to show it. So let me pop this up over here. I'm changing. If you guys want to come out of Mural for a minute, just pop over to my screen that I'm sharing. I'll show you something. So in Mural, I also created a template for a social contract because what we have to do is create the psychological safety. We have to create the boundaries of what a team can and can't do and what they will and won't do. And the way we do that is we create, and this is just a Mural template, right? That they go create a Mural from this. But I divide what is a social contract into 3 pieces. What are the behavioral agreements? How will we behave together? What is the shared responsibility, even with individual contributors? What does it look like to have each other's back to the best of our ability? And what kind of culture do we want? And here's why I think this is important. Evan Layburn, who is the guy who runs Business Agility Institute, friends of mine, one of the things he says is that Agile, really, transformation should not be top down or bottom up. It's infusion. It's like making tea. He's English, so of course it's tea. But what he said was, if you had the tea leaves sitting in water and the leadership never poured in, you'd just have bitter tea. But if you had the tea leaves working and then the leadership always changed and they're pouring stuff in and they never listened, then you would dilute it. You would have weak tea. But together, when the feedback cascades up and strategy cascades down, feedback rolls up. Remember what I showed you in PowerPoint, that loop, right? When you have that, when you aim for that, you build the team culture one tea leaf at a time. It's not that each tea leaf does it. It's that the combination of tea leaves building cultures is how you change the culture. Because here's my big statement for the day. Agile is not a technology play. Agile is a culture play. Agile changes the culture because if you change the culture, you can change anything. But if you do not change the culture, very little will stick, right? Absolutely. That's why transformations fail all the time. So we stay, well, how do we change the culture? One team at a time. So by building this here, and what these guys go do is I say, okay, now that you've done it, brainstorm your ideas with sticky notes here of our behavioral agreements, our shared responsibility, our team culture. No bad ideas. No one gets to say, and you can dot vote on it, right? So what ends up happening is when you dot vote on these, then only the things that are unanimous make it to the social contract. And there's no shaming the one person who didn't vote on it. Nope. So now only the unanimous things. And now your team culture is different from every other team culture, but together you're creating a unified way of working. That's the mindset of agility that I love, which I find so powerful. So, pardon me, wrong screen. So yeah, that's why this is so powerful. And then when we come in over here and we're able to pivot on the data, we can see these insights at both a micro level. So we scale down to the team, right, very narrowly, and we scale back up to the organization to understand what's going on and how is that working. And I'm able to create this visibility in a very cross-functional way without throwing anybody under the bus. We are making it safe.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great overview. Thank you.
Quite welcome. Other questions?
What kind of tea do you like?
Earl Grey, and it's probably my favorite. And my wife makes a mint tea that I think is pretty good.
Oh, try Yorkshire Gold. That's my favorite.
I will. Thank you for that. Do
Anthony,
you have
there's a
folks
question-
dot
there's an
vote?
earlier
I see that.
question.
I'm reading it. Yeah, sorry. Do you have folks dot vote on those to find the common themes or similar? Yeah, I just talked about that. Did I miss another question?
Yeah, there's one from Christina. Green question for attendees: is using this kind of matrix and grids a common thing people develop as senior product managers or leaders? I guess that's a question for the field.
For the field. Anybody?
And you can put your responses in the chat as well.
Or open your mic. Yeah, like anybody? Bueller?
So what's your background in having these kind of experiences to be able to do this with Excel? Because I can tell you right now, I've done Excel with numbers and some words.
Quick. Yeah. So qualifier, let me just quickly say, I didn't build that. I found somebody inside IBM to build this. One of my great strengths is I know my weaknesses, right? So Temet Noske, I know myself and I know I can't do that. So I try to surround myself with people who can. And so I just put the call out and I said, I need to do something like, where would I do that? And I really actually started with software development. And I said, who can build me an app? I got no traction there, but I found somebody in operations who was able to build this. And again, MVP, right? But it's just a way to get started. Now, all this is, and when you say it's pivot tables. All this is slicers and pivot tables. So it's not technically all that difficult. It's just what they needed was the thinking that went behind it, which is what I've been obviously working on. So it was a great partnership to have somebody help build out my idea. Rudimentary, obviously, but functional enough that it's adding immense value.
So Anthony, you mentioned at the beginning something you call lean Scrumban as a way you had to organize this unplanned work. And how did you build on the results you showed us later? You showed some Excel table with a list of text to process. How does that fit in? Do you have some real manual Kanban boards like sales teams have, and do you link?
Yeah, we do. And I can't obviously show you the actual boards because it's proprietary data inside IBM. But what I would say is think of every Kanban board that's ever existed, right? Some sort of backlog, doing, done, waiting, like that. The big difference is we use targets, objectives, and key results. So we say, what are we aiming for? What is the known quantity of things that we're responsible for hitting? Anything required goes there. And then the objectives are how we add value to clients. The key results are the way we see progress made towards adding value to clients. And that if we do those things, it should move the needles for our targets. And so what we do is on Trello, we use Trello. What we do in Trello is we have them, when it gets to done, say what went well, that you feel like that was high value, which means it was great for the client, it was great for IBM. And they mark that with a custom field that we just put, high value, and then it automatically sorts it. What's cool is when you come to do the mural board, they have their Trello boards up and they just look at, they go, went well would likely go there. That's worth sharing. What did not go well, that would likely be worth sharing. So it becomes a nice symbiotic process, very manual, but it's 10 minutes. It's not a huge lift. And the benefit's high enough that even though it's not automated, the value's high enough for people not to mind to do it because they like the result of that collaborative space. And Mural makes that possible, obviously, but Trello is how we visualize prioritization of work and workflow. And because we use custom fields, it just makes it easy. This is simple stuff, but it just makes it really easy for them to come into their Mural board every week ahead of the meeting, ahead of the retrospective meeting, and pre-populate the 3 or 4 cards they're going to highlight, and we're good to go.
Oh, great.
Did I answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Other questions, other thoughts, other feedback?
I was trying not to overblow this and not think about ways to make it even more complicated. That's why I didn't ask all my questions. But I can imagine this turning into, that's always a bad habit, you know. But I couldn't help but think about include some learning about things that the teams and the executives and even the management decided to do, but they had some learnings about it. It works well, but under certain conditions, or it used to work well, it doesn't work anymore. That's going to turn to be very complicated to manage, even as text data over time. Anyways, there's got to be some tactics to deal with it.
Yeah. We want to automate. You know, there's something my boss Andrew Burrows says it really well. Andrew says, anytime in Agile you want to see something scale, you have to push control down to the person and with authority to the person lowest to do it, right? Lowest possible person in the organization to do it. Anytime you need critical thinking skills. But for everything else, you automate, right? Because if it doesn't take critical thinking skills, why is a human doing it? So what we're trying to get at is how do we figure out, how do we automate the things that anybody could do so that the people who can do the work that matters most are freed up to do that. And so that's part of that. Remember I said there's two ways to do something. You either optimize and improve the upside or you reduce downside. Like those are your two ways. So people all the time would come to me and go, hey, so we need to do X. And they were looking to build a better ladder to get out of the pit. And I said, well, before we do that, I just want to figure out how we can stop digging. So I'm not really interested in building a better ladder while the pit's still being dug. It's just much easier to A, stop doing the thing that's not working, and B, get that cycle time back to put towards something that could work. So we ruthlessly eliminate things that don't work to the best of our ability, because that's one of the easiest ways to start winning. It also is a really easy way to build morale, because when people see that you stop doing stupid, they like that. So.
Yep. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions for today? This is fun. I mean, I'm enjoying it. I just want to make sure that it's valuable to you and I'm not just over here like a kid in a candy store.
That's
Hi,
great.
Anthony.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I have a question regarding also, you mentioned how much time it takes basically at the beginning. So we know that all these radar boards are so valuable for the team and also for the management, because this is how you want to make transparent, right, what the issues are, and to be able to prioritize them, and of course to action on it, or the executives to action on it. My question is, how much time, at least for you, it took you at the beginning when you kind of research a little bit and all that? And I can tell you why I am interested in this, because I work for the bigger banks and also consulting companies such as, KPMG, IBM, PwC, etc. And whenever we propose something to the teams to pull them out of the pit, as you said, that we have to make these issues that they are encountering visible, they would always say, this is something else that I need now to work with, right?
Yeah.
Rightfully
every time.
so. But we know that after you invest this time at the beginning, then the life becomes easier and better, right?
Yes.
So roughly, how much time would you say that that you invested, when at the moment that you had already the idea, not from the beginning while you are researching, how could I, create something that is meaningful and visible and all that stuff?
Sure. That took the research from where I started to where I realized what I needed took about 3 months. And then from there to where I had the idea, the coalescence of the Patkua's starfish, along with the circle of influence, that was another 2 months of just trying to figure out. And I went through that in the PowerPoint, basically. That was about 2 months. And the rest has been since then learning, right? So this is version 1.0 7 of the Retrospective Radar. That's your version 1.8 technically today. So that's improved vastly as we've gone, right? So it's very much agile, iterative, right? MVP kind of thing. I will tell you that the biggest heavy lift is the time taken right now without using the API to go in and change the color of the sticky notes per squad,
Yes.
per week, 26 squads, right? Per week, times 4 or 5 times a month, depending on number of weeks in a month. And that tells you right there, that's about 5 to 6 minutes each for each one of those to do that. So do the math there, right? And then you have the import process to download all those CSVs. So another couple minutes there per. And then you've got the import process. We have 2 files right now. I have a file that basically converts it over so that the hex values for the color code on the background, the things that make it show which segment it came from, converts that into segment and circle. And then we do that as a data import into Excel. And I will tell you that that's taken between 10, well, it's down to about 10 to 12 hours a month now, but it was about 15 to 20 hours a month manual effort, just because it's MVP, right? It's not automated. You are doing it the hard way.
Right.
But what we found was those, even, you know, in my role, 15 hours a month was worth it to get the kind of results we're getting. I mean, I think you guys could see like that level of insight at scale is like, that's gold. So yeah, I'll pay 15 hours a month, you know, for that. But ultimately we do want to automate that. We do want to get it down. So for me, that's been kind of the number. And I would say that it's about, so if I did the math, that's 30 minutes. I'll try to remember how to do the math on that. So it's 2 squads per half hour. Am I doing the math on that right in my head?
I like to do this like.
But it's a lot of work. It's heavy lifting, but it's been worth it.
Right. The reason is also that, as I mentioned, I was part of the transformation, the big transformation programs to program to one of the banks. And we started 16 labs. So we created this based on the Scrum at Scale framework, but we created a similar process into Jira, you know. And for the beginning, the Scrum Masters that we ask actually to help us in, you know, doing this at the team level, and then we will elevate only the most important items through the next level, which would be directors and the next level executives. And they were complaining a little bit because obviously nowadays everyone is so deep into, you know, sometimes they are working on 2, 3 projects, not only one as we're supposed to. And they were pushing back. However, we still went with Jira, and we managed to get into a level of sharing the most important items the same way into radar boards. So they are extremely valuable. But as you mentioned, you do have to put in the time actually to create this. And you may use probably an analyst, not necessarily, you know, for the beginning.
No, it's been me. So I was the one guy. So I had to do the coaching, the training, the building. I had to do it all. I did partner with someone to help me build the Excel. So, but that was 15 of my hours, which means I wasn't doing something else. It was just worth it to get these results until I can get it beyond the manual and automated. And plus I got faster at it. We found ways to make it faster, but like we cut the time, you know, down by 50% at one point. And so going from 15 to 10 hours was a pretty big win. But we know we got to solve that. But here's the thing. I don't lead with time in the same way I don't believe in leading with price or features or benefits. I lead with value, right? So I lead with the value. The value is, can we as an organization deliver greater value at scale and demonstrably understand the benefit to and for our clients? If we can see that and understand that, what is that worth? Because now the work that you do is more aligned, more in tune, and is of greater value. Who doesn't want to do that? And if the answer is you, I wonder why you're in our company, because that's not what we're about. So by leading with the value, is there a cost? Of course, nothing's free, but I don't highlight the cost. I don't highlight the time. Instead, I highlight the value, because when you get people rallied behind it, this is why I think Simon Sinek is genius. Simon Sinek is an aspirational optimist who knows how to operationalize aspirational optimism. That's genius. That's super hard. That's what I try to do. And so for me, it's not about the effort, it's about the result. And then I can justify effort. And if we ever get to a point where, but I'm needed to do X, Y, and Z, I go, great, what do you not want done? Right? Because if you want to do this, we need to hire. Like, it becomes so easy to justify then the people and resource allocation over time. So I don't lead with time or price ever.
Yeah, no, I ended up always in doing actually this work, the grant work, to present it to the directors and then the executives. And once they get interested, then this is easier, right? It's easier than to put. So, but creating the framework is absolutely fantastic, because you have to do it, as you said, yourself, because you know exactly what's the output, what you want to get.
Plus, I know how the sausage is made now, right? So that I have an insight that I couldn't have had any other way. So that's all right. Other questions, thoughts, or feedback from anybody?
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Actually, it's David again. Couple questions. In fact, you just talked about value. Let's go with that first. If this recorded time wasted, wouldn't that be valued? If someone comes in and puts, hey, you know what, I wasted 2 hours doing XYZ, or the classic one is meetings, right? Now, usually I analyze that, and then I'll go to whoever can support us and say, listen, this chunk of time equals this kind of cost. How do we get rid of it? That seems to me would be valuable to those looking into my team from a higher place.
Because, David, and you're pointing out what I led with at the beginning in the PowerPoint. This is how you quantify qualified data, right?
Okay.
So we are quantifying emotion, sentiment, analysis, not numbers. we're quantifying the way people think about something. That's cool. And what it does is it gives us a way to have a different conversation. Now it's not a complaint. Now it's an objective discussion. Game changer, right? Because it's not about, did we waste 2 hours? It's, why do we continue to waste 2 hours? 2 hours is a throwaway, but 2 hours times 5 people times 10 weeks times, right? Suddenly there's where when you quantify that, and that wasn't just a number, that was an insight, because it wasn't just that it cost us the 2 hours. That's 2 hours I didn't do something else, and it's 2 hours that's killing morale, and it's 2 hours that they consistently see as non-valuable, and they feel like their feedback doesn't lead to change, right? There's a huge opportunity cost well beyond the cost of 2 hours. This gives us a way to talk about that.
Yeah,
I think that's a game changer.
I think the key word there is reframing, right? You basically just reframed. What I would do is say, hey, this is too much money, have a chat about that. So I like the reframing. Then the other one, I know you've gone through this, but I missed the steps, because this is pull, right? I'm an executive, I'm pulling this report, or I would be pulling this report. What do you see as the process, let's say from team all the way up to the cycle feedback?
Sure.
All the way up, and when it gets accomplished. Could you just briefly go through that path?
Well, yeah, I had an example of that. One of the teams found an issue where we were working with one of our clients, and they bought something pretty recurring, and different portions of their business would buy it. And the tool that we used had a problem that if you didn't do a certain step, or I can't remember what the problem was, it basically meant that the orders went on hold. We couldn't invoice for it, and they couldn't see the status of their order. So basically it's lose. Like it was all downside, and it only affected a certain percentage. But what we did is in Trello, we just said, hey, every time this happens to you as a rep, we had custom fields, put the number, just tick it, right? And so we just had like almost like caveman, like, there's 5. But what would happen is per rep, we were capturing this, and we were able to say, actually, for the total volume of business we did, this happens this often, which relates to this amount of time. By the way, we correlated back to the amount of invoiced money that was not invoiced and the amount of time it was taking. And now we had a conversation to leadership around, hey, here's this thing that I know you've heard about before, but it's a bigger deal than anybody ever imagined. And 2 weeks later, it was fixed. Right, because we had the data, right? Yeah, exactly. And we had it because they were capturing a feedback piece, not some number somewhere. We correlated the data with finances later, but it was the first part of just going, can we capture that? Yes, the answer is yes, we can.
And then I think you said you have like a weekly session with the C team. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this, we do the comp sprints, and Scrum would be 1 week sprint, 1 week iteration for us, we call it. But what happens is each team does that. and then the management gets the view of it. But what we do is we would bring the second line or the business unit executives together once a month and go, what are you hearing from your first line managers? Because the first line managers would all meet under their BUE, talk about this. Some of the sharing was happening there. And then at that highest level of that executive, they would then start sharing that. And then we would roll up of that, what is the most pressing thing that our senior leadership needs to be aware of to address, change, or mitigate? And that's became a very scalable way of dealing with it with data. So it was a story point. It was a conversation, not just a complaint. And new opportunities, because we saw new things that we were like, we should start this. This is what we're learning. We're seeing this in the market. So you could get ahead of the curve and not just deal with the issues. So it's the both and. It's the genius of the and that was super helpful. Good questions. And Michael, I want to cover yours. You said, do you close the loop with the teams with the status of the teams they raised, percent completion, time to completion? Yes. So that spreadsheet, which I'll just share again, because it's just easier to do this visually. That spreadsheet, when you go to look at this, when I come down here and I pivot that, I can look by team or whatever, we can see the status. And this is all lorem ipsum, right? Just for the sake of dummy data. But it's the idea that that is completed. That's still under consideration. So each week we look at the things still under consideration as a manager. I filter by that and I go, show me everything that's just under consideration, right? And now I don't have to filter the whole list. I just look at that. And it gives me the ability to look and see where we are and remind me what I need to do. Of course, they should be managing this in their own workflow so that this isn't staying in Excel. This is just a way to visualize as a dashboard so that then they can go act on it. But what we're doing is we're holding ourselves accountable, because not only is it here, we publish this internally on an internal website. So what we're doing is we're saying, here's the dashboard of the dashboard. And we show a very high level aggregate, and we show that. So there's no hiding. If your feedback is there, we are going to make sure it's visible. Why? Because we have respect, openness, courage, empathy, and trust as our 5 values. And if it doesn't feel open, is it agile? Probably not. If there's not trust, is it agile? Probably not. So we are very transparent in that, because we know that's how you build that trust, and it's how you hold people accountable. Not to hold people accountable like this, but to hold people accountable like this. And it's just to help. When we all believe the best and we're working towards that together, and we're clear on our goals and our objectives, then we look for things to benefit each other, not to hold each other like, why didn't you do this? Instead, it's how do I help you? What do you need? And that's a game changer that starts with the social contract per team, but then permeates and builds the culture you want for the organization. Did that answer your question, Michael? You're thinking of summary level, but this helps. Yeah, we do a summary level. I know I can't, again, just proprietary stuff, but I do a summary different mural board that summarizes what percentage of feedback was on each ring and each segment for the month. What was the ratio per month, and what's the 90-day rolling average of that feedback, so that we see, is the stuff going to senior leadership increasing in quantity or decreasing? Because that's a pretty good proxy for action on feedback and trust of feedback. So we capture those things as well. All right. Any other questions for today?
Not another question, but just I try to export the stuff in Excel, and looking at the final dashboard you're showing us, the pivot tables, I can assume that there is a ton of work that went into that, but it's a one-timer. But it must be a ton of work that went into there. The second one is what I like the most about the approach, since you're open for feedback, is that I don't think it adds any additional effort from the teams. In fact, if you look at all the assessments and all the management work that is done just to have one-time snapshots once per year, even at best, from employees in sales, just to get that kind of data, but they don't have the freshness. It's not live. It's not agile. It's not continuous. It's incredible waste compared to this approach, where people can go and just write down their cards. Nobody tells them when to do it. They don't have to gather. It doesn't have to be as formal as a stand-up or something. Maybe it is. It forces communication discussions, but actually the tool itself that you propose doesn't force them to do it. And that's what I like the most, because I think it saves a ton of time. If I would do a quick business case for it, I could definitely turn out the numbers in a way that it shows that you save them hundreds of hours. Because, just bring, yeah.
And Luis talked about that. You have to kind of sell the concept because it looks like more work up front. And my thing is, if I had you spend 10 minutes and we saved you 10 days, would you do it? Well, yeah, right. But you have to make that case. And so what we do is we just demonstrate it over time, one bite at a time, right? It's how do we do one bite at a time? And a lot of that is, this is going to be style. This is not Agile. This is Anthony. To me, it's about relational equity. So I go build relationships. I put myself in the place of being the guy that says, I have your back, you can trust me, and I'm going to prove that day in and day out all the time. So I earned their respect, I think. And I don't mean to pat myself on the back with this. I'm just saying stylistically, it's one thing to tell people to do something. It's another to walk with them through it. If you look at any of the change models, and actually, when I do my initial kickoff training, I show Satir change model. I show the norming, storming, performance, brain, Tuckman. I show 3 different change models. And I say, if you notice that the pattern is they all have a dip, that's because human. You don't get to not go through the valley. Change is always bad in the short term. It's just welcome to being human. What we as leaders commit is that we will walk with you through the valley. We will not force you to go through it. And we will not make you go at a certain cadence. It is your choice because you always get to choose, right? You always have a choice. And if we don't give you that freedom, we will never really understand what it means to deliver value at scale, because we will just deliver increments of stuff, maybe at scale. And that's why I'm saying, when you look at a burn up or a burn down chart, or even a cumulative flow diagram, it just shows efficiency, but there's nothing about it that says you did the right thing. There's no way for it to, right? This is helping us do a little bit of that gut check. They go, but was that what we should have done? Should we do that again? Not can we do it again? Should we do it again? Should we do something different? I love that, because it means that, from this book right here, Turn the Ship Around, David Marquette, we push control down, we have assurance of technical competence, and we have clarity of mission. And if you do that, so much makes sense. It becomes so much easier. And it's about leading without authority. Another book I happen to have literally right here, right? Leading Without Authority by Keith Ferrazzi. He does a great talk about this, of what that looks like. To me, style. To me, the 90% of what I do is soft skills. 90% of what I do is helping people feel good about where they are and where they can be, and describe what that looks like. And it is an aspirational optimism. It doesn't mean, like, I just had a person the other day, situation where she was very frustrated. And so she talked to me about it, and I validated it, because empathy wins, right? Empathy isn't sympathy. Empathy wins. And when I just validated and I listened to her, I go, that's really tough. Like, that's really, 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 really hard. And what I want you to do, yes, it is. That is the book. Is I want you to think about what could you do differently? Because if so, maybe that's a reflection point. But if it's nothing, then understand that sometimes things are just going to happen that they suck. But 10% of it's what happens to you. 90% is how you're going to respond to it. So who do you want to be out of this? Not what do you want with the other person? Who do you want to be out of this? Right? Where is that in any Agile book? It doesn't exist. But yet it's a critical part of coaching. It's a critical part of me helping them understand how to operate inside this complex organization. And so much, I think, of agility has to do with empathy. So it's why we do ROCET, rocket, respect, openness, courage, empathy, trust. Because if you lean into that really heavily and you demonstrate that, man, it's like there's no cap on where you can go with people. Right, so off my soapbox, sorry.
It's organizational psychology. I haven't done a lot of strategy work. I can tell you that just the benefit of knowing that, you can have your own perspective, your own bias as an employee, and say, hey, we're talk to, only the people who think the same as you have confirmation bias. There's 3 of you, and you think the whole organization is wrong. They don't know that we know the truth. But when you look at the data, and since it's anonymized, you can see if you're just an outlier or if there's a real pattern. Since you said everything's open and everybody can see what they wrote, it's not going to be edited or anything. And that can help remove a lot of biases and improve the psychological health of a lot of people who will say, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this way. I got to ask myself some questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I believe in neurological rewiring. So if you want to look at, Dr. Carolyn Leaf or Brene Brown, but there's just great stuff there that applies to how it is in the human experience and working in teams. It's a huge opportunity for us as leaders to to understand what it looks like to lead from that perspective, and let the performances take care. The performance data is going to take care of itself if you take care of your people. But that's not a popular opinion. Someone said, I know you mentioned psychological safety, but if you had to cite one specific thing that contributes most to creating a willingness to share feedback, what would it be? Self-awareness, which is not common enough. That's my answer. Final answer.
Hey, Anthony,
Other thoughts, questions?
One
Yes.
more. For those companies that are doing safe and they have those quarterly, meetings, would you suggest using that, or is this purely for teams?
No, if I've said something that makes it sound like it's for teams, it's because I'm using the word teams a lot, but it's because of the construct that I'm in. I'm trying to describe how I'm thinking about this in a team construct, but what am I really trying to do? I'm trying to help us align towards organizational delivery of value for the benefit of our clients, right? So that is not limited to a team. My boss showed us a video the other day of Formula One. You can see this on YouTube, of a guy who's he was put on the pits crew of the fastest pit crew, which was 1.99 seconds changing the tires on a Formula One car, 2 seconds, right? And this guy's never done this before, and they train him how to do it, and they end up making a time that's better than the world's best time. And it was just a fascinating video, but there were 22 people like in the pit crew. But that's probably one of the best Agile teams I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's so counter to the idea of small team, small team, small team. It's just this, we've got to stop going back to what safe, and it's not just throwing safe under the bus, right? Any framework exists because someone had to monetize a codification of insights, right? Yeah. So because of that, they have a bias, just like we all do. And generally speaking, it is pretty nice to have small teams, generally speaking, but there is no hard and fast rule. And I think that it was Dave Thomas that did the talk, Agile is dead, long live Agile, was genius, because the day you make capital A more important than little a, you're wrong, or you're anti-Agile probably. Right. So yeah.
Good point. Cheers.
Yeah. Anybody else for today? Andrew?
I think Coburn said the same thing, that Agile was dead.
Oh. I was thinking, wasn't it Dave? What, am I wrong about the name? I thought
you're probably right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't remember. I just remember watching the video and laughing because
they both said it, both of them.
No, both of them. Okay.
Any other questions from the participants?
No, other than many thanks. Enlightening. Great.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Anthony, for sharing. This is enlightening is a good word for it. Thank you very much.
Quite welcome. My honor.
Thanks, everybody. Anthony, would you like to give your email again, the contact?
Yeah, I'll just put it right here in the chat, acoppedge@ibm.com.
And don't forget to participate in Agile20. We'll also drop the link into the chat. It's called Agile20 Reflect. All right, I'd like to thank Anthony very much for taking the time to present today. Big round of applause for Anthony. I'd also like to thank the participants for asking questions, very good questions. Thanks for putting your questions into the chat as well. This recording will be made available to everyone who participated, so look for that. And any final questions? Otherwise, we'll let you go for the day.
All right.
Thank you. Cheers.
Everybody.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for participating.
Thank
Have a
you.
great rest of your day.